Lewis Hamilton explicitly blamed Ferrari's mid-race strategy delay for missing the podium at the Dutch Grand Prix, stating on team radio that they were not unlucky, but lost time earlier, which cost them P3. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how that single operational failure created a championship deficit that cannot be undone. The resolution to this specific tactical collapse is coming into focus right now, tied directly to a ticking clock on lap 42, where every second of hesitation compounded into a points gap that has left Hamilton tied on 83 points with George Russell, but classified behind him on countback. This is not a story about bad luck or a mysterious lack of speed, but rather a precise forensic breakdown of an unresolved decision in the heat of battle that turned a potential third-place finish into a fourth-place result, with massive title implications. You are about to see the exact sequence of events that transformed a competitive race pace into a strategic disaster. But before we get to the definitive proof of what went wrong inside the Ferrari garage, there is a lingering tension from Saturday that makes Sunday's failure even more confusing. Hamilton had qualified 5th, just one spot ahead of teammate Charles Leclerc in 6th, and while he openly admitted that all the Mercedes-powered cars were ahead in qualifying trim due to a known power deficit, he simultaneously predicted that Ferrari's race pace would be better and the car would be superior over a stint. He told his team pre-race that he expected to close the gap seen on Saturday because the car was better for the race, setting up a direct contradiction between his confident prediction and the frustrated reality that unfolded when the lights went out. So why did a driver who felt completely comfortable with his setup changes and believed he had the pace to fight for a podium end up sarcastically mocking his own team's execution just 20 laps later? That disconnect between expectation and outcome is the open loop we need to solve, because it suggests the problem wasn't the machinery itself, but something far more fragile happening in real-time communication between the pit wall and the cockpit. The stakes here extend well beyond a single frustrating afternoon at Zandvoort, as this specific operational fumble has direct mathematical consequences for the 2026 Drivers' Championship standings, where margins are razor-thin. Hamilton sits level on points with Russell at 18-3, yet the missed podium means he lacks the higher finishing position needed to break that tie, turning a theoretical strategy error into a tangible championship liability that will haunt the team for the rest of the season. We know the final classification showed Hamilton P4, 16.755 seconds behind Norris, and Leclerc P5, 17.258 seconds back, mirroring their qualifying order despite the car supposedly being better in race trim. But knowing the result is different from understanding the mechanism of failure, and that mechanism involves a split-second refusal to follow orders that unraveled months of development work in less than 2 minutes of track time. Time ran out, orders failed, trust broke, the narrative emerging from multiple outlets including Crash Net and GP Blog consistently frames this as an internal strategy dispute rather than a pure pace problem against Mercedes, which fundamentally shifts where we should be looking for answers. If the car was truly capable of matching the silver arrows on Sunday as Hamilton believed, then the biggest problem exposed isn't aerodynamic or mechanical but deeply human, rooted in the hesitation that defined those critical moments when the race was genuinely there for the taking. We are going to dissect that hesitation next, starting with the exact radio transmission that triggered the entire collapse and the subsequent silence that proved far more damaging than any engine penalty ever could. The moment that defined this entire controversy arrived on lap 42 when Lewis Hamilton keyed his radio and delivered a message that stripped away all diplomatic ambiguity, stating clearly to his engineer that he was quicker than Charles Leclerc and his tires were better. This was not a vague suggestion or a polite inquiry about strategy options, but a direct performance claim made while running behind his teammate with superior rubber management, creating an immediate operational test for the Ferrari pit wall. The team responded by ordering Leclerc to pit and let Hamilton through, yet the execution of that instruction became the exact point of failure that Hamilton would later cite as the primary reason for missing the podium. Leclerc initially ignored the directive and held track position for at least one extra lap, despite his crew already waiting in the pit lane, a hesitation that transformed a routine team order into a public relations crisis and a championship-damaging delay. Silence followed. Seconds ticked. Momentum died. That single lap of resistance cost Ferrari a 3-4 second pit stop window that should have been clean and decisive, instead becoming a chaotic scramble that bled precious time onto the tarmac at Zandvoort. When the swap finally happened on laps 43 and 44, Hamilton had already lost the time advantage he had been carefully building against the Mercedes cars ahead, and his frustration manifested instantly over the team radio with biting sarcasm. He told his engineers it was a great way of wasting time and capped it with a sarcastic good job, making it unmistakably clear that he viewed the delay as self-inflicted damage rather than competitive misfortune. This verbal exchange is critical because it establishes Hamilton's own real-time assessment of the situation before any post-race reflection could soften his perspective or align it with official team messaging. So where does that leave us regarding the actual pace debate? The confirmed reporting from Motorsport.com and ESPN attributes the missed podium specifically to this strategy execution error around the Hamilton-Leclerc swap, not to Ferrari lacking the fundamental pace to match Mercedes generally. Yet here is where the narrative gets complicated, because while we know the strategy failed, we do not have public telemetry data to verify whether Hamilton's pre-race confidence in the car's race trim was objectively correct in a vacuum isolated from this incident. No sector times or tire degradation numbers have been released to confirm if he truly had the raw speed to pass Russell cleanly without the delay, meaning we must rely entirely on Hamilton's subjective assessment and the observable outcome rather than hard data. This uncertainty doesn't negate the strategy failure, but it does prevent us from definitively saying the podium was guaranteed absent the error, leaving a gap between what Hamilton felt and what can be mathematically proven. What's really on the line here is whether Ferrari can trust their own operational processes under pressure when the championship fight demands flawless execution. Hamilton's post-race comment to his engineer that they weren't unlucky but lost time earlier, which cost them P3, serves as the definitive verdict from inside the cockpit, explicitly rejecting any narrative of bad fortune or external factors. He tied the result directly to that mid-race tactical delay, not to a raw pace deficit against Mercedes, which means the biggest problem exposed isn't about horsepower or downforce, but about the split-second decision-making that separates podium finishes from also-rans. The final classification bore this out brutally, with Hamilton finishing P4 at plus 16.755 seconds to Norris and Leclerc P5 at plus 17.258 seconds, maintaining their qualifying order despite the car supposedly being better suited for Sunday's demands. This pattern of operational hesitation stands in stark contrast to Saturday's optimism, where Hamilton had expressed pleasant surprise at setup changes that made the car feel completely different and flipped it on its head for qualifying. That improvement gave him genuine belief heading into the race, making the subsequent strategic collapse even more painful because it wasn't born from a lack of preparation or car development, but from a failure to execute when the opportunity presented itself. The tension between Saturday's mechanical progress and Sunday's operational regression is what makes this exposure so damaging, as it suggests the hardware is ready, but the human element remains vulnerable under championship pressure. We'll examine how this vulnerability resurfaced later in the race when another strategic call prompted Hamilton to question whether he was being used as a guinea pig, revealing that the lap 42 delay was not an isolated mistake, but part of a broader pattern of uncertain decision-making that eroded driver confidence throughout the afternoon. This is where it gets serious, because the gap between Hamilton's pre-race confidence and the post-race reality isn't just about one lost position at Zandvoort, but about whether Ferrari can reliably convert competitive machinery into championship points when the title fight hinges on operational precision. Before the Dutch GP weekend even reached Sunday, Hamilton had already framed the narrative around a specific expectation that separated qualifying performance from race potential, acknowledging openly that all the Mercedes-powered cars were ahead in single-lap trim due to a known power deficit. Yet in the same breath, he predicted that Ferrari's race pace should be better and the car would be more competitive over a stint, explicitly telling his team that he believed the setup changes had addressed the shortcomings seen on Saturday. That prediction was not made in isolation but was grounded in tangible improvements he had experienced during practice and qualifying, where setup adjustments had made the car feel completely different and flipped it on its head according to separate coverage from Motorsport.com and ESPN. Pace existed, execution didn't. Points vanished. The critical distinction here is that Hamilton's pre-race comments deliberately separated two different problems: the qualifying trim power deficit against Mercedes, which he accepted as real, and the Sunday race pace. which he expected to neutralize that advantage through superior tire management and car balance. This means the biggest problem exposed after the Dutch GP isn't that Ferrari lacks the speed to challenge for podiums, but that their operational execution prevented them from proving whether that speed was sufficient to overcome the Mercedes-powered cars in clean air. Without public telemetry data confirming sector times or degradation rates, we cannot mathematically verify if Hamilton's confidence was justified. Yet his own post-race framing attributes the missed podium entirely to the mid-race tactical delay with Leclerc rather than to any inherent pace shortfall. That attribution matters because it shifts the diagnostic focus away from the wind tunnel and toward the pit wall, where decisions are made in seconds but consequences last for entire seasons. Remember how this all started, with Hamilton explicitly blaming Ferrari's mid-race strategy delay for missing the podium, stating they weren't unlucky but lost time earlier, which cost them P3. That opening claim now connects directly to his pre-race prediction, revealing that the exposure isn't about discovering a hidden flaw in the car, but about confirming that the team failed to capitalize on a package the driver genuinely believed was capable of fighting for third place. The tension between what Hamilton expected based on Saturday's setup breakthroughs and what actually unfolded during the lap 42 swap creates a narrative arc where the car's potential remains theoretically intact but operationally unproven. This is precisely why the guinea pig comment later in the race carries such weight. As it suggests, the erosion of trust began not with the delayed swap itself, but with the accumulation of uncertain strategic calls that made Hamilton question whether the team shared his belief in the car's race day competitiveness. The championship math amplifies every ounce of the operational uncertainty, as Hamilton now sits tied with Russell at 83 points, but classified behind him on countback due to fewer higher finishes. A confirmed P3 at Zandvoort would have broken that tie in Hamilton's favor, transforming the lap 42 delay from a frustrating anecdote into a direct mathematical injury in the driver's standings. Mercedes leads the Constructors' Championship with 425 points to Ferrari's 338, meaning every point lost to strategic hesitation widens a gap that becomes exponentially harder to close as the 2026 season progresses. The research confirms no official technical cause was found for Ferrari finishing behind both Mercedes cars beyond the strategy execution error, which means the team cannot point to a development pathway or upgrade schedule to fix this particular vulnerability. It exists purely in the realm of human decision-making under pressure, making it simultaneously the most fixable and most fragile aspect of their championship campaign.